A single gunshot shattered the stillness of the Rossi mansion. The chandeliers trembled as crimson spread across the marble floor. Luca Moretti said, "It's over." His voice cracked like thunder over silence. Outside, the wind howled through the iron gates, carrying whispers of death. Detective Michael Carter stepped from the shadows, his coat heavy with rain and secrets. He saw the lifeless body of Don Alessandro Rossi, the crime lord who once ruled half the world's black markets. Michael's pulse quickened. His mission had begun. The air reeked of gunpowder and betrayal. Isabella Rossi stood frozen by the staircase, eyes wide with grief and disbelief. Michael said, "We're not safe here." She nodded, trembling. Every corner of the room felt haunted by unseen eyes. The phone buzzed, one final message glowing on the dead man's screen. "It's done. The king is dead." The mansion lights flickered, and Michael felt something move behind the curtains. Someone was still there. The silence after death is louder than any scream. Michael Carter's heartbeat echoed through the hallway as rain drummed on the windows. Isabella Rossi whispered, "They'll come for us next." Her voice trembled like shattered glass. The air smelled of smoke and fear. Luca Moretti paced the room, his shoes clicking like a metronome of guilt. Michael said, "We move now, or we die here." Outside, headlights flashed briefly through the iron gates. Someone was watching. Lightning lit up the portrait of Don Alessandro Rossi on the wall, his painted eyes seeming to follow their every move. Shadows shifted across the marble, stretching longer with every flash. Luca said, "You don't understand who you're dealing with." Michael tightened his jaw. He did understand. He'd seen this kind of darkness before, and it always ended the same way, with blood. The three stood in the dim study, the air thick with secrets. The smell of whiskey and iron mixed under the soft glow of a desk lamp. Michael Carter placed an envelope on the table. "These are the names," he said. Isabella Rossi's hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were photos, allies turned traitors. Luca Moretti clenched his fists, his face pale with fury. "He knew," Luca whispered. The revelation burned like acid. The loyalty they'd sworn meant nothing now. Michael's mind raced. He couldn't tell them that the list came from someone inside their family. The room felt smaller, suffocating. Outside, thunder rolled across the horizon. Isabella said, "Then we're already dead." Michael looked at her and said softly, "Not yet." Outside the mansion, the storm eased but danger didn't. Michael Carter's car waited under flickering streetlights. He scanned the perimeter, every sense sharp. Luca Moretti loaded his weapon silently. "They'll send hunters," Luca said. Isabella Rossi looked up, the wind tangling her hair. "We can't fight them all." Michael's voice cut through the cold. "We don't fight, we disappear." A dog barked somewhere beyond the walls. The gates creaked open as a black sedan approached slowly. The air felt electric, charged with threat. Michael's hand tightened around his gun, his reflection in the car's window merging with the ghostly face of Don Rossi's portrait inside. It was as if the dead still watched, demanding revenge. Inside the abandoned chapel behind the mansion, candlelight danced over cracked walls. Michael Carter unrolled an old map of the city's underworld routes. "Every empire has a weakness," he said. Isabella Rossi leaned closer, her voice trembling. "And if that weakness is us?" Michael didn't answer. Outside, wind howled through shattered stained glass, scattering ashes across the floor. Luca Moretti whispered, "The syndicate will strike back before dawn." The weight of betrayal hung like smoke. Michael looked toward the altar, where Don Rossi once prayed for strength before every war. His words were low, but resolute. "This time, we end it." A sudden crash echoed outside, and the candlelight flickered violently. Someone had found them. The rain hammered against the cracked windows as Michael Carter sprinted through the alley, his breath ragged in the cold night air. Behind him, the sound of footsteps echoed, too close. Isabella Rossi's voice crackled over his earpiece. Michael, move. They're right behind you. His pulse raced, but it wasn't fear that drove him. It was the adrenaline, the knowledge that something bigger than him was at play. A sharp turn, another alley, but the shadows seemed to close in with every step. He could hear the voices now, Luca Moretti's laugh cutting through the rain. You can't escape what's already in motion, Luca taunted. Michael's fingers tightened around the gun in his jacket. He wasn't running anymore. He was hunting. The city was alive, but so was the danger. The chase was just beginning. The truth would not be so easily outrun. Breathing hard, Michael slipped into an abandoned building, the door creaking as it closed behind him. Silence. He pressed his back to the cold, brick wall, listening for any sound, any hint that they were still coming. His hand went to the wound on his side. Blood soaked his shirt, but it wasn't enough to slow him down. Isabella's voice cut through the silence, urgent. Michael, you need to get out of there. But it wasn't the city he needed to escape. It was the truth. The betrayal. He could still hear Luca's words ringing in his ears. It was always going to end this way. Was that just the beginning of what was to come? Michael clenched his fists, the realization settling in. The war wasn't just external. It was inside him now. The choices were mounting, and he had no way of knowing if he could win. The night was still young when Michael and Isabella met their contact in a darkened cafe. A single figure sat at the far table, Damien Voss. He didn't need to speak to command the room. His presence was enough. Michael took the seat opposite him, his eyes never leaving the man who had orchestrated every betrayal they had faced. You still think you can control this? Michael asked, his voice low. Damien's eyes glinted, cold amusement playing on his lips. Control, he replied. I've never needed control. You've always been the ones chasing it. I just move the pieces. The power in Damien's words hung in the air. Michael's fist clenched under the table. The game wasn't just being played against him. It was being played with him. The stakes were higher now. They weren't the hunters anymore. They were the prey. The night was quiet, but Michael couldn't rest. The weight of the truth was too heavy, and in that weight he found himself at the doorstep of Enzo Marchetti's old apartment. Enzo had been his mentor once, guiding him through the shadows of the criminal world. Now, in the silence of the old apartment, Michael sat across from the man who had seen him grow. It's a game, Michael, Enzo said quietly, his voice hoarse with age. You're always trying to win, but in the end, the house always wins. Michael's eyes darkened. Then why bother, he asked, the weight of his choices settling in. Enzo's eyes softened. Because you have to. You might not like the rules, but the only way out is through. Michael looked down, the words sinking in. He wasn't sure if they were meant to comfort or condemn him, but they were the truth. And the truth was all he had left. Michael stood on the rooftop, looking down at the city that seemed so far below him. The rain had started again, cold and heavy. Isabella's voice crackled over his earpiece. We're ready, Michael. The plan's in motion. But there was no plan anymore. Only action. He had made his choice. There would be no going back. The past few days had broken him, his trust, his beliefs, his identity. Now he had one mission, to take down the empire that had destroyed everything he loved. But, in the pit of his stomach, the fear still gnawed at him. He had to move, or the weight of everything would swallow him whole. As the rain began to pour harder, he took a deep breath, wiped the blood from his face, and made his decision. He would face the truth head on. There was no other choice. Dawn painted the city in dull gold, a deceptive calm that hid the blood beneath. Michael Carter stood in the old safe house, his eyes heavy from sleepless nights. The air smelled of oil and metal. Isabella Rossi brewed coffee in silence, her trembling hands betraying the chaos inside. Luca Moretti arrived, voice low as he said, "We've got a lead." Michael nodded, but his gut twisted. Nothing about this felt right. The map on the table glowed faintly under the dusty light. mocking roots once owned by Don Alessandro Rossi. Every path led to one name, Damien Voss. Michael's jaw clenched. We move at dusk. But, as Isabella placed the cup before him, her gaze lingered too long, her smile too still. A chill passed through the room. The storm had already begun. It just hadn't struck yet. By evening, the safe house had turned into a war room. Rain tapped on cracked windows as thunder echoed in the distance. Wash! Michael Carter leaned against the wall, exhausted, his thoughts tangled between loyalty and truth. Isabella Rossi whispered, "You don't have to do this alone." Her words were soft, carrying the weight of something unspoken. Luca Moretti cleaned his weapon in the corner, pretending not to listen. "Trust," Michael said, "is what gets you killed." For a moment, their eyes met, a fragile truce built on old wounds. Outside, lightning flashed, illuminating their faces like ghosts from another life. Isabella smiled faintly, but her hand slipped something small into her pocket, unseen by both men. The meeting took place in an abandoned subway station, the walls breathing damp air. Michael Carter followed Luca Moretti through shadows, their steps echoing like ghosts. A single figure waited near the tracks. Damien Voss, the man whispered to control half the city's syndicates. His calm smile froze the air. "You've been chasing a phantom," Damien said. His words carried certainty, not arrogance. "Your war isn't with me. It's with the one beside you." Michael's gaze flicked toward Luca. The silence between them thickened, heavy with unspoken history. Damien stepped forward, his shoes crunching glass. "You want truth? Look at who pulls the trigger next." Michael felt his pulse roar. Betrayal had a face now, and it wasn't the enemy. It happened fast. One blink, one breath, and trust shattered. Luca Moretti raised his gun. No hesitation, only cold duty. Michael Carter staggered back as the shot tore through his shoulder. Isabella Rossi screamed, her voice slicing through the echo. "You lied to me!" she shouted at Luca, tears streaking her face. Blood spread across Michael's coat, his hand gripping the wound. Damien Voss watched from the shadows, satisfied. "You see," he murmured, "loyalty always ends in blood." The world slowed to a pulse. Luca's eyes trembled. Guilt, fear, obedience. Michael dropped to one knee, pain twisting his breath, but his gaze burned with defiance. He whispered, "You should have aimed for the heart." The second shot never came. Only silence, thicker than death. Hours later, rain washed the streets clean, but not the guilt. Michael Carter limped through a back alley, blood seeping through his sleeve. Each step echoed like a heartbeat, fading into darkness. Isabella Rossi followed, silent, her eyes hollow. "He was forced," she whispered. Michael didn't answer. In the distance, sirens wailed, a lullaby for the dying. He leaned against the wall, breath trembling, realization dawning like a curse. Luca's betrayal wasn't for power. It was for survival. Damien Voss had turned them all into pawns in a game older than their loyalty. "No one walks away clean," Michael muttered. The rain hid his tears. He looked at the city skyline, fire glowing in the distance, and whispered, "Now it's my turn." The night after the betrayal was silent. The city seemed to hold its breath, as Michael Carter sat in an abandoned warehouse, the rain whispering against the cracked windows. The wound on his shoulder pulsed, but the ache in his chest was worse. Isabella Rossi watched from the doorway, her shadow long and still. "You need rest," she said softly. But he didn't move. The light flickered above, throwing ghostly shapes across the walls. Every drop of rain sounded like a memory, every flash of lightning a reminder of Luca's face when he pulled the trigger. Michael's mind replayed it over and over, the pattern behind every betrayal slowly connecting. The truth was near, breathing in the silence. He whispered, "It was never about the families." Something colder had been pulling the strings all along. The smell of tobacco and roses brought him back to the past. The flashback burned vivid, Don Alessandro Rossi alive again, seated beneath gold chandeliers, speaking softly to Damien Voss. The world runs on fear, not loyalty, the Don had said. The memory unfolded like smoke. Michael Carter, years younger, had watched from the corner, unaware that the meeting would seal his fate. The sound of laughter from the Don now echoed like betrayal. In the present, Michael clenched his fists, realizing how far back the web stretched. Isabella's voice trembled. "You knew him before all this?" He nodded, eyes fixed on the flickering candle. He was the one who taught Voss the rules. The scent of gunpowder filled the air again, but this time the truth burned brighter than the fire. The wind cut through the city's silence as Michael Carter entered the old cathedral where Enzo Marchetti waited. The elder's hands rested on a cane, eyes heavy with secrets. "You were never supposed to know," Enzo said. His voice carried the weight of decades. Michael stepped closer, fury rising like heat from the stone floor. All those deaths, all that blood, for what? Enzo's gaze drifted toward the cracked, stained glass above them. "To protect the illusion," he whispered. The words struck deep. The Mafia had never been at war. They had been manipulated into killing each other to hide a global network. Michael's pulse thundered in his ears. The candles flickered, throwing fractured light across their faces. Truth wasn't justice. It was a wound that never healed. Damien Voss awaited them inside a glass tower overlooking the city, calm, composed, almost regal. "You've been chasing ghosts," he said, voice smooth as silk. Michael Carter's reflection glimmered in the glass beside Voss's. "You turned families into pawns." Voss smiled faintly. "No, I turned chaos into order. Crime without purpose is waste. I gave it meaning." His words dripped with conviction, poison wrapped in reason. Isabella Rossi stepped forward, her eyes full of fury. "You destroyed my father's name for balance?" Voss turned, unshaken. "For evolution." Silence hung heavy between them, filled with the hum of the city below. Michael's fists tightened. The lines between villain and savior blurred until neither made sense. The rain had stopped. The city lights shimmered like dying stars on wet asphalt. Michael Carter walked alone through the empty streets, every step echoing with revelation. The truth had changed him. The Mafia was never a family. It was a machine built to serve a hidden empire. Isabella Rossi followed quietly, her expression hollow but resolute. "So, this was the truth all along," she said. He turned slightly, voice low but steady. "Now we know what we're fighting for." The horizon flickered as dawn approached, washing the streets in pale light. For the first time Michael felt clarity, not peace but purpose. The war wasn't over. It had only changed its face. The wind howled through the empty streets, carrying the scent of smoke and gasoline. Michael Carter's breathing echoed in his ears, quick and shallow. Isabella Rossi stood beside him, her face pale, her hands trembling. They were close. Too close. The moment was near. From the shadows, Luca Moretti appeared, eyes dead, gun clenched in his hand. "I couldn't stop it," Luca said, voice cracked. Michael's jaw tightened. He could feel the weight of his gun against his side, its cold metal, a reminder of the violence that loomed. Their silence was thick, oppressive. They'd both fought for survival, but only one could leave this night alive. Michael's heart pounded. "We'd do this together," he whispered, not knowing whether the words were for himself or the woman beside him. The streetlights flickered. The clash was coming. The air between them snapped like a rope pulled too tight. Luca Moretti moved first, the gunshot ringing through the alley before Michael could react. The bullet grazed his side, and the pain exploded across his ribs. "Why, Luca?" Isabella cried, voice breaking. "Oh." Luca's face remained emotionless. "It's too late for redemption." Michael rolled to the side, blood staining the pavement. His breath was ragged. "You don't understand what you've done," he spat through clenched teeth. They were fighting for control of their lives, their choices, their fate. The night trembled with the violence of it all. the streetlights blinking in distress. Isabella was behind him, watching with a mixture of horror and disbelief. The violence was inevitable, but it still cut deep. The battle raged in the alley. Shots were exchanged, but there was no winner yet. Then, in a flash of movement, Isabella Rossi stepped into the line of fire. "Stop!" she shouted, but it was too late. The bullet struck her side, sending her to the ground with a scream. Michael's heart stopped. Time slowed as he crawled to her, ignoring the pain in his body. "Isabella!" he gasped, his voice breaking. She blinked, blood spilling from her lips. It's not your fault," she whispered. Her hand trembled as it found his. The world was ending around them, but in that moment, all Michael could feel was the cold weight of her body. The fight was still raging, but nothing mattered anymore. This was the cost of everything. Michael Carter rose from the ground, eyes blazing with fury. The pain from his wound was nothing compared to the rage coursing through his veins. Luca Moretti stood there, still, waiting. "This ends now," Michael growled, stepping forward. "You've torn everything apart." Luca's eyes softened for just a moment, as if he was about to say something, but the moment passed, and the gun was raised again. The world around them seemed to close in. Fire, rain, destruction. Michael lunged. They collided in a blur of motion. Their fight was no longer about survival. It was about justice. Luca's body hit the ground, but Michael didn't stop. His hands trembled as he raised the gun, staring at the man who had once been a friend, a brother. "This is the end," Michael muttered, and pulled the trigger. Silence followed the gunshot, broken only by the distant hum of the city. Michael Carter stood over Luca's body, panting, his hands still gripping the weapon. The rain had stopped, but the cold still seeped into his bones. Isabella's death weighed on him like a mountain. He hadn't saved her, hadn't stopped it all in time. But now, with Luca dead, the game had changed. Everything had changed. Michael looked at the city, the skyline lit with fires from the battle they had just fought. The fight was over, but the world was still burning. "It's done," Michael whispered, the words hollow. The victory felt more like a funeral. As the first light of dawn broke across the horizon, Michael's gaze hardened. There was no going back. There would be no peace. Only survival. The streets lay still, the chaos of the battle fading into the hum of the city. Michael Carter stood alone, his back against the cold brick wall of the warehouse. The rain had stopped, leaving behind only the smell of damp concrete and smoke. His breathing was steady, though his heart still raced with the memories of Isabella's death, Luca's betrayal, and the final confrontation. The city stretched before him, silent now, as if mourning its lost souls. The wind carried the faintest echoes of their voices, lost in the dark. He had won, but the price was steep. What was left? Nothing but the bitter taste of truth. The world he fought to protect was broken beyond repair. The truth had shattered it all. He looked down at his hands, bloodied but steady. The battle was over, but the war for his soul had just begun. As Michael Carter walked through the empty streets, memories from the past weeks flashed before his eyes. Isabella's smile, Luca's betrayal, and the heavy cost of truth. The world had changed, and so had he. The guilt gnawed at him. He had lost so much in his pursuit of vengeance. He whispered, "Is this what I wanted?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. He stopped in front of a cracked window, his reflection staring back at him, hollow-eyed and haunted. The city was quieter now, but the storm inside him raged. The ghosts of the past didn't let go. The streets he had once fought to protect now felt foreign to him. Was redemption still possible? Or had he lost that too? The only thing left was to move forward, even if it was into a future darker than before. As the day wore on, Michael found himself standing at the edge of the pier, overlooking the endless stretch of water. A shadow moved beside him, and for a fleeting moment, it was as if Isabella Rossi was there beside him, her hand reaching out. Her voice, soft and distant, echoed in his mind. "You're not alone, Michael. You never were." His heart clenched, a mix of sorrow and love. "I couldn't save you," he whispered, his voice breaking. The wind shifted, and the illusion faded. The reality of her absence pressed in on him like a weight he couldn't carry. But in that moment, he understood. Her memory would stay with him forever, as a guide, a warning, and a piece of the man he would become. He wasn't alone. He never had been. That evening, Michael stood by the grave of Enzo Marchetti, the mentor who had shaped his early years. The old man's teaching still lingered in his mind, words he had once ignored now echoing with truth. "The world isn't black and white, Michael. It's about choosing which side of the gray you want to stand on." Michael touched the cold stone, his mind racing. He had fought for what he thought was right, but in the end, the lines blurred. Enzo had warned him. But now, with Luca's death and Isabella gone, Michael understood. Redemption wasn't found in the fight. It was found in the acceptance of loss, in understanding that the world would never be what he imagined. A single tear fell, but he wiped it away. His life, like the city, would never be the same. The decision weighed on him, as the city skyline stretched before him. He had been given a choice, and now, with everything lost, he knew it was time. The battle had taken its toll, but Michael Carter was still standing. The final choice lay ahead, the future unwritten. "It's over," he whispered. The war within himself, the war with the city, had been won. But the real victory came not in the fight, but in the acceptance of everything he had lost. There was peace now, quiet and uncertain. Michael took a final look at the city before him, the flames of the past dimming in the horizon. Tomorrow the world would wake, and he would be there, changed, but still standing. His journey wasn't over. It was just beginning. The city was still, but for how long? Michael Carter stood in the middle of the street, watching as the first rays of dawn bathed the world in soft light. The sounds of life slowly returned. The hum of distant cars, the soft murmur of birds in the trees. His chest ached, not from the wounds he carried, but from the loss that had marked every step of his journey. Isabella was gone. Luca was gone. Everything he had fought for, the battles, the betrayals, had led him here, to this quiet, empty moment. He took a deep breath, the air heavy with the weight of all he had lost. There was no turning back, but neither was there any peace. He had fought, and now the war was over. Or was it? The question lingered in the air, unanswered. Was it worth it? Would it ever be? Michael walked slowly, his footsteps echoing in the silence of the deserted streets. Every step felt like a mile. He wasn't sure where he was going, only that he had to keep moving. The city behind him, the blood, the fire, it was all fading. The weight of the past was too much to bear, but he couldn't stay in its shadow. As he passed the old warehouse, his gaze briefly lingered on the broken windows, the memories of all that had transpired there flooding his mind. He had left a part of himself behind in that place. But now, he had to let go. He had to leave it all behind. The world was moving on, and so was he. There would be no more vengeance, no more fights, just a long road ahead, one that he would walk alone. As Michael sat on a park bench, his hand brushed against a small piece of paper in his pocket, Isabella's last message. He unfolded it carefully, her words still fresh in his mind. "You're not alone, Michael. Remember what's worth fighting for." His heart tightened, the pain of her absence almost unbearable. The breeze carried the faint scent of roses, a memory of her. "I failed you," he whispered, but the words felt empty now. Her death had carved a hole in him, one that would never heal. But her memory would remain. She had given him something before she left. Hope. Not the kind he once sought, but the kind that let him keep going, even in the face of everything he had lost. The road ahead was uncertain, but he wasn't walking it in vain. Time passed, and with it, life moved on. The city shifted, its rhythm evolving, as new faces filled the spaces left by the old. Michael had disappeared into the background of a world that continued turning. He no longer sought revenge or redemption. The city had forgotten his name, and he was okay with that. He had found something that felt like peace. He no longer carried the weight of the past on his shoulders. He had made his choices, and now he could rest. But even in the quiet of his new life, the memories of Isabella and Luca, of Enzo and all the others, still lingered. They were a part of him now, not in the way they once were, but as echoes, soft, yet ever present. As the sun set, Michael stood at the edge of the pier, watching the ripples in the water reflect the fading light. His hand brushed against his coat pocket, where the last piece of Isabella's memory still rested. The city behind him, the memories, the bloodshed, all of it was part of the past now. He had lived through it, and he had made it out. The only thing left was the knowledge that no matter how much he fought, some things were beyond his control. Truth must never be owned, he whispered, the weight of his journey settling in his chest. The water in front of him seemed endless, just as the path ahead seemed uncertain. But there was no more fear. Just quiet acceptance.